Feedback. Feedback. Hi, this is Theo Broughton.
And I am Thabiti Mpinga.
Inviting you to join us each Monday at 9 a.m. for Feedback,
a positive image production by Hood Research.
Encourage others to tune in each Monday on
Comcast Detroit, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, watch WHPR TV Network anywhere.
And take us along with you. Feedback, feedback, feedback.
It's you liberals who have lifted them up, Howard.
Paul, you conservatives make a mistake. You can't afford to strangle hope in people. Without hope, people become dangerous.
No, Howard, you liberals have let them invade our society. You give them jobs, political jobs.
Paul, you missed the point. It's only the smart ones we move up.
That makes it even worse.
No, we have to move them up. If we leave a smart one in the ghetto, he might develop into a leader against us. But if we raise him up into white society, we neutralize him. He feels compelled to try to act like us. He loses his identity and his racial anger, if he has any. He becomes alien to his brothers. They realize he sold them out and they grow to hate him. He becomes worthless to them and safe for us. No, thank you. In fact, in his love for the creature comforts, except for his color, he's become one of us.
In organizations and in corporate spaces, just addressing the imperative of being an inclusive environment, dealing with the broad scope of diversity, whether it's gender or race, sexual identity or religion, to make sure that the environments that people go into every day to do their work are environments that are healthy and operating with a degree of equity, with the intent to operate fully equitable, so that everybody is heard and felt and respected.
Mm-hmm. The thing that I remember about you is the business. Speaking of you being an entrepreneur, the Java House that was behind the Fisher Building.
Yes.
And I had occasions to come and enjoy. And is there a idea for another business or opening that you have in mind?
Absolutely. So yes, we operated as 736 Java for about a decade, right behind the Fisher Theater. Mm-hmm. It was a place where friends meet, and thank you for being one of our friends. I appreciate that.
I was also a friend, and you had open mic at certain times. I've been up and performed as well.
Is that right?
Yes.
Oh, that's so perfect. I love it when we have a reunion of our friends, right?
Yeah.
And so we have been, for the last several years, just doing kind of private events, making the facility available for people who have small parties or meetings or receptions, but we have a huge vision of reopening in 2018, and our new vision is called PAUSE, P-A-U-S-E, PAUSE Detroit, where you can come and exhale. And the concept is similar in that we will have, it'll be cafe style, we'll have food, and we will have the coffee vibe, and hopefully as we evolve we'll also be able to introduce a wine presence, because I am a lover of wine and I really like to be around it all day whenever possible.
You would have wine tastings as
Yes,
well?
ma'am. Yes. So that is the goal, but we will open our doors as a cafe and really focus on the coffee products, the small plates, and reintroduce some of the unique aspects of a coffee house vibe, a local coffee house vibe. And what a good time in Detroit for African American entrepreneurs to step into that space and seize whatever opportunity we can, even when we need to make the opportunity itself.
Now, there is an event that is coming soon that you have organized. Tell us about the event, the purpose, location, time, etc.
Absolutely. So I am in partnership with Ecumenical Theological Seminary and the Frederick G. Sampson Foundation, which is a foundation I established after my father passed in 2001, with the intent to not only honor his legacy and to make sure that we continue to perpetuate it in a variety of mediums, but to also really engage social activism on the grassroots level, and to also make sure that we are in relationship with seminaries across the country so that up-and-coming theologians and preachers and pastors know about who my father is and about the wisdom that he imparted upon all of us and when he walked amongst us. And so with that mission, we have partnered with Ecumenical Theological Seminary to launch our very first Frederick G. Sampson Symposium. And the symposium is scheduled for this Saturday, which is May 19th, from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. with a 7 a.m. registration. We are delighted and excited because we have on hand the Reverend Dr. Jeremiah Wright Jr. as our speaker, as well as the Reverend Dr. Frank Thomas and the Reverend Dr. Frederick Douglass Haynes. Additionally, we will also have a number of really extraordinary local speakers, ministers, pastors, activists sharing their different perspectives, from the Poor People's Campaign to the Prophetic Voice, that will take place in the series of workshops on that day as well.
Oh, I see. Tell, for those who may not remember Reverend Sampson, tell us some, how do we put it, some of the good things that he did that the viewers need to know.
Okay, do we have all day? Because I would love to be able to just run that list. So my father was the pastor of Tabernacle Missionary Baptist Church that was on the west side and continues to be on the west side, but initially located on Beechwood and Milford in the old West Siders area. And he pastored there for 30 years.
Wow.
His last official pastoral act, physical act, was to break ground for the new church that currently exists on the corner of West Grand Boulevard and Grand River, and a magnificent edifice under the leadership of Reverend Nathan Johnson. But my father's community service in Detroit, I think, really is indicative of his lived experience coming from the Jim Crow South, traveling and becoming through the South and becoming a civil rights activist. And so by the time he settled here in Detroit, we were experiencing the maturity of his voice, both prophetic and his activism voice. And in that space, he was very engaged with numerous organizations throughout the city and throughout the region, whether it was New Detroit or the Empowerment Zone or the relationship that he had with schools, middle schools and high schools throughout the city, whether there was a time where he was president of NAACP, the Detroit chapter. And so his legacy, I think, is worthy of the acknowledgement and the remembrance. And so it is my goal, being the one that was so honored to be his daughter, to be able to do what I can, whether it be big or small, to just simply do a shout out for a man whose life was well lived.
Oh, yes. Now, for the event on Saturday the 19th, the location is?
So Ecumenical Theological Seminary is right by the stadiums on Woodward in Detroit, and the address is 2930 Woodward Avenue, and it's right by Little Caesars Arena and the Fox Theater, right in that area.
Oh, okay. 2930.
Yes, ma'am.
Right. Woodward Avenue. Okay. The event that you're having, kind of give us a outline of the day, agenda for the day, you know.
So it's entitled, I Think I Said Something, and for those who may remember my father or perhaps have ever heard him preach, he would often accentuate a point of escalation by saying, I think I said something. So in that space, we've entitled the symposium, I Think I Said Something, Prophetic Proclamation and Social Activism. And our day will consist of coming together at 7 a.m., as early as 7 a.m. for continental breakfast and for what we are referring to as dawn seekers. Many years ago when Dad did pastor, he held a 6 a.m. Sunday morning Bible study and called it Dawn Seekers, and he did that for probably 20 years. And so in that space, we are having a prayer meditative space at 7 a.m. to 8 a.m. Called Dawn Seekers, and then we roll right into the morning session with Dr. Frank Thomas doing our opening plenary, and then evolving into our workshops that will begin about 9:45. We have Reverend Bill Wiley Kellerman doing the Poor People's Campaign workshop.
Oh, yeah.
Dr. Mawaya Reynolds doing Jailbreak Ministry, Jailbreak Prison, Power, and Patriarchy. And then Prophetic or Popular by Apostle John Harvey out of Flint. So those will be our workshop series, and then when we come out of our workshop, we will have an opportunity here. The Reverend Dr. Jeremiah Wright, who was a dear friend to my father, but is like a second father to me, and I just adore him. And he has really shown himself faithful to our community and to the work that's got to be done to create more equity. So it is just a great privilege to have him in the house. And then, of course, after lunch, we will come back together. We'll have a panel discussion on the role of faith in race in social activism. And our panelists will be Reverend Ed Rowe, Reverend Ezra Tillman, Reverend Kanetta Harris, and Reverend Raul Estrevara. And then we will close out after that panel discussion, which I anticipate will be quite lively, really charging the faith community to step into critical spaces in community and be a voice for those who need them, and to extend yourself beyond the walls of the church, because that's where the real work is done, when you step outside of those church doors.
Right.
And then we will wind it up with Reverend Dr. Frederick Douglass Haynes, who is known internationally for the work that he does with the Samuel DeWitt Proctor Conference and the activism that he has, his voice in that space.
Oh, sure.
Hello, caller. You're on the air. Would you share your name and how you're viewing us, please?
Good morning. This is Dee Dee.
Good
I'm
morning.
listening to you on my phone.
Okay.
Great show.
Oh, thank you.
Okay, a question for your guest. Tabernacle. Do you remember the dance program that you guys had over there back in the 50s?
No, that was a little bit before my time.
I know you're probably too young for that.
Yes.
You were a part of it?
They had that was my first dance. They had ballet, tap, modern dance, and I took that all the way to Wayne State. That was my major because it started over there at Tabernacle.
Wow. Oh.
Yes, when you said that, I just started smiling. Thank you, Theo, for bringing your guest on.
Oh, you're welcome.
That's
okay, bye-bye.
Oh, all kind of reunions this morning.
Indeed.
Yes.
Now, I was going to ask, when you mentioned having churches more engaged in social activities and dealing with, the social environment within, let's say, their own atmosphere of their churches and everything. This is not denominational?
Yes.
Okay. And I would think that ministers, the whole community is welcome, correct?
Absolutely.
Right. But, I'm thinking that the heads of churches would be even more welcome, maybe because they lead their flock, so to speak, and to have these guidelines and particularly some of these breakout sessions, I think, that would be more impactful because then they bring the message to their congregation and such. Now, we have another caller, and then I want to get into a couple of these breakout sessions.
Okay.
Hello, caller. You're on the air. Would you share your name and how you're viewing us, please?
Happy Monday, Sly Dog.
Happy Monday to you.
I just want her to give me the date. I wrote down everything, but I didn't write down the date for the event.
The date for the event is Saturday, May 19th. So that's this coming Saturday. And I do need to say that there is a registration fee. You can go right on ETS Seminary, etsseminary.edu, and register directly online so that we know who will be in the house. And the registration fee is inclusive of continental breakfast, lunch, and then program materials, etc.
Is there a phone number? Because that was a lot to try to write down.
So you can call 313-220-0447. Let me say that again, 313-220-0447. 0447.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And if I can just share out, the registration fee is $50. This is part of Ecumenical Theological's 60th anniversary as a seminary in Detroit, and also the inaugural year of events for Dr. Kenneth Harris, who is the new president of ETS. And so it's called the Year of Great Celebrations, and this is one of the events that is in support of the institution. And
Now, Kenneth Harris is a minister.
yes,
You're
ma'am,
talking
Reverend
about.
Dr. Harris is a minister, pastor, and the president of the seminary.
Okay. Well, there's another person by that name
Oh, okay.
who that's why I wanted clarification. There was something that Beatty wanted to ask.
Well, we have another caller, but
Oh,
my
go
my
ahead.
question will come.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Hello, caller. You're on the air. Would you share your name and how you're viewing us, please?
Good morning, my wise and progressive friend.
Happy Monday, Sam.
And I want to say hello to my co-alumnus from Tennessee State University.
In the house.
Oh, boy.
I think people that her dad was the Michigan Civil Rights Commissioner. I worked with him when I was assistant personnel director
Oh,
with the Michigan Civil Rights Commission. He was an outstanding civil rights commissioner. And we got things done for the public when he was on the commission.
wow.
Now it's a perfunctory organization.
Mm.
So I'm very happy and proud that Frida, as I may call her that,
Of course.
has continued his legacy. I also remember the African American series for young African American males. You forgot that, Frida, also,
Oh, yes.
that he used to have every year
Yes.
and bring in Dr. Wright. So keep up the good work. And good research, also keep up the good work.
All
Have a
right.
blessed day.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Sam.
Their reunions.
Yeah, everybody. I want to mention that you said Reverend Rowe is going to be there, and he's the pastor at Central United Methodist Church, where Maureen Taylor has the Up and Out of Poverty group that works there.
Well, he retired a few years ago.
Did he?
He did,
Oh.
but you couldn't tell by his level of engagement.
Right, because he's still there. Even though he retired, I'm like, okay. Right.
Now, with the breakout sessions, what I was wondering, there's 3, and all of them seem very interesting, but are they all simultaneous?
Yes.
Okay, so a person has to just kind of say which one. And I like the fact that I believe Dr. King started the Poor People's Campaign,
Mhm.
and it may be celebrating an anniversary at this time or something close to that, because I know it's been in the news
That's right.
through other talk shows I've heard. And so, but again, that's because of the nature of it having extended, and we're still having to deal with the Poor People's Campaign, which is somewhat tragic in this society that, after all this time, nothing has changed enough for us to be able to say that we've gone over that hill and we've moved on to other things. Another one of the ones that I found interesting, I don't know, I guess Dr. Mayawa Reynolds will be able to elaborate on it, is the Jailbreak Prison, Power and Patriarchy. Now, does that have anything to do like prison ministry, or when people are brought out that they are given some sort of, guideline or foundation to build on for them to be reintroduced into society?
Some kind of wraparound service.
So it actually, jailbreak is used metaphorically,
Okay.
meaning really dealing, kind of breaking out of our own kind of limitations in terms of how we think about power and patriarchy, not necessarily specifically about the physical imprisonment and incarceration, although I would imagine that she would touch on that at the very least from a symbolic perspective. But, we're really dealing with, in particular, the issue of patriarchy in the African American church community, where women are still working very hard to be in a space of respect and equitable standing, if you will.
So one other concern was the number of ministers who are pastors, who are also women.
Yes, for
We'll
sure.
talk about that.
When you think about the number of churches that are in the city of Detroit proper, and you think about the number of women pastors in that same space, it is far, far less than 1%. I mean, it's a percentage of 1%. And so that means there's great opportunity, right? We don't look at it solely as a negative, but we look at what can we do to move from where we are to where we can be when we are operating with our best selves.
Now, you know, it's interesting because this nation in general is a patriarchal society, and have always felt that, you know, maybe the European male was the one who was best suited to guide all the other cultures, ethnicities, etc. within it. And I say that because even within our African American community, we've adopted, you know, those same sort of, I guess, motivations to, not motivation necessarily, but the same type of mindset, let's say, where men don't easily let women into, I mean, we know this in the corporate world, obviously, but, you know, even in the spiritual world or the religious world, that there's a limitation on how far women are allowed to go. So I just see that as, you know, a very pertinent thing to address, because it's so hard for us to break the chains of, I guess, the mental position we're in now, where we still, I mean, women don't make the same amount of money as men. So I'm just saying, just across the board, women have been slighted, and, you know, so I find this very interesting in itself.
Yeah, and what you say is so true, and it is, the glass ceiling needs to be shattered, not in one particular area, but quite frankly in all areas. And the wage discrepancy is certainly a highly important issue that's got to be addressed. But you know, the uniqueness around the faith community, particularly in the African American space, is that we have to kind of go back historically and understand that, yes, there is kind of this established standard around patriarchy in this nation, but then there's a unique perspective when you think about the role of African American men and women in our own community historically, particularly as it pertains to how we were able to garner value and power and presence. And the Black church was a place where African American men could stand straight with back arched and be respected and revered as such. And you know, and so that's wonderful, but there's room to share, right?
And I think it's also, you know, for myself, I always try to be open-minded. So therefore, I don't look at a person in terms of, let's say, gender or race. I look at them in terms of what comes out of their mouth, what their thoughts are, and then do my evaluation or my observation of them based on that. Because a lot of times we can, I would say, silence the voice of people that really need to be heard. And I extend this to my granddaughter as well. Even though she's just 9 years old, there's always something that you can bring to a conversation or perspective that if you were limited by gender, race, etc., that does not add to the conversation. It's like, I guess, a buffet meal. You know, you don't want to leave certain foods out just because they're not something that you yourself would consume, but it makes the whole table more fuller and develop something. Now, one of the things I was going to ask you about is the book that you have here. I think I said something.
Yes.
Maybe you could share with us the overall context of the book and if it's available.
You know what? I'm so glad you asked that question. That was beautiful. So in relationship to this first symposium in Dad's name, I was actually finally probed and poked enough internally to say it is time that I do something that I've been wanting to do for a very long time, and that was to publish a book on my father. And so it will be released this week. As a matter of fact, the symposium will be its unveiling, if you will, of the book entitled the same as the symposium, which is, I think I said something, The Life, Legacy, and Ministry of Reverend Dr. Frederick George Sampson II. The book is a book that was really intentionally designed for both the layperson as well as those who are in that theological space. And I say that because Dad touched so many people on so many levels, that what I wanted to happen with this book was that anybody from a little child to an elder who is in remembrance and reflection can pick it up and say, I can connect to this experience. So it is a book that is a collection of some of his pastor's pens, which are abbreviated. He could get up and preach for an hour and a half, and so a sermon transcribed would be about 50 pages all by itself, but the pastor's pens, which are some of his writings, many of his quotes, a lot of his images, and it's also a cursory reflection of his life. So he was born in Mansour, Louisiana, and so we start his life from 1925 when he was born. And we have glimpses of his life throughout his both personal and professional career. So from Port Arthur, Texas, to Washington, D.C., where he met and married my mom, and graduated from Howard University, First Bishop College and Howard University, and then into his pastoral career at in Roanoke, Virginia, and Louisville, Kentucky, where he was very much a civil rights activist in that space where he was marching with Dr. King, and served as in leadership with the NAACP and other entities, and then the bulk of his time here in Detroit, Michigan, where we're seeing images that are going to be familiar to many and perhaps be something anew for some. And then we wind the book up with tributes. His peers, his sons and daughters, his family who remembered him. And also social media. I did an ask to social media, listen, what do you think about my dad? And got some amazing responses. All that is encompassed in the book.
That sounds wonderful. And it's available?
It is available. Again, it will be unveiled at Saturday, and then it will be available on Amazon. Again, it's called, I think I said something, The Life, Legacy, and Ministry of Dr. Frederick G. Sampson. And my hope is that there won't be any difficulty locating the book.
Okay. Go ahead.
Hello, caller. You're on the air. Would you share your name and how you're viewing us, please?
Yes, Tyrone over the internet.
Okay.
I'd like to ask the question after a statement to your guest.
Okay.
I've been looking at the black community in Detroit and in the cities I've been to. I see that the vast majority of the employed in the black community are women, not men. I go to the gas stations, go to supermarkets. I see black women are working for the immigrants, but not the men. So I would think that the question, I remember a long time ago, I forgot when it was, a song, I Can Do Bad by Myself. It was women were singing that because they had the jobs and men didn't have the job. Would you say that's more in the black community is not as black women can't be promoted, but black men don't have a job and only women are being hired, and it's a tactic used by the government and private industry to hire the black women and not men. Would you say that's the biggest problem in the black community, and of women promotion is small in the black community? That's a question I have for you.
Thank you, Tyrone.
So I'm not going to say that is a problem, because the challenge is not whether black women are working or black men are working. The challenge is what are the opportunities available to all people. Mm-hmm. And while you might see more women at work, then we're still dealing with the issue of wage equity. And with wage equity being such a problem, we're still having to, black women still fall in the lowest rung when it comes to being promoted, wage equity, being valued in the workplace. I mean, we have made profound accomplishments over the many decades, particularly since Jim Crow, but we have not by any means made it to the promised land. And that's inclusive of black men as well. There's no doubt that when you look in corporate America, you will see more black women in that space than you will see black men, but those women are rarely in leadership positions, by which I mean they are rarely in spaces on the executive level or in the C-suite. So if you think about the Fortune 500 right now, there is currently not one African-American female in that space that is occupying that C-suite space, as or over an organization or a corporation. So we've got a lot of work on both sides of the conversation. And when the previous caller made reference to African American male spirituality, that my father elicited it at Tabernacle for over 10 years. And really the whole point was, how do we uplift our African American men so that they are equipped, prepared emotionally, physically, and spiritually to step into the spaces that they are worthy of already. Mm-hmm. And that means that we have to operate as a family. So it's not pitting one person or one gender against another. It is simply saying that women as well struggle, and just because we see women working does not necessarily mean that we've got it made, because that's not the case.
Mm-hmm. And I would just add myself personally, being a political scientist, that one of the things I noted in corporate America, but this is just a part of a trickle down throughout America anyway, is that many businesses would, in order to comply with certain civil rights legislation, be able to hire a black woman so that she could fulfill, as we know here on this panel, certainly they get two birds with one stone. They have a female that they can list, and they can also list her as an African American, or even in some cases, let's say a Hispanic American, because of course they're trying to broaden that perspective of equity. But as you say, and I agree as well, that I remember back in the day where the black woman who may have been hired, she may have been a secretary or whoever you would see when you first came into that office. So they gave the illusion, but as you say, they never move up that hierarchy of or chain of command to where they're actually being a CEO. So, and I don't think that we should, as may have been suggested, but I'm not going to say for sure, call it that. Let's say the gas stations and such, there's a natural fear against black men anyway. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure they're more comfortable with black women, along with the fact that I've noticed some of them actually try to befriend or hit on these sisters as well. I'm not comfortable with that, but I have nothing to do with how they run their business or establishment. But again, my point being that black women have only been a let's just say the window dressing for corporate America, but never able to actually make decisions or anything along that line. So I don't think, and I agree with you totally, there's no black male against black female. It's just us against a system that we have to try to bring some resolution of equity to.
That's exactly right. I mean, we have to scratch the surface and not just land in that topical space where what we see is all that there is. The structural and institutional racism that exists within this country is so pervasive and so profound that there's no simple answers. It requires deep excavation and really thoughtful work in terms of how do we do what is necessary so that both men and women of any race or nationality or culture are being able to be valued and able to achieve their highest possibilities. And let me be clear, I don't want to take away from the sisters that are doing some amazing work out there, because there are sisters that are running organizations, running nonprofits, pastoring churches, and I acknowledge and I respect and I revere them, and so thank you for their work and their leadership, but we just know that there's much more room at the top.
Mm-hmm. And certainly qualified people who can fill those roles if you get beyond the bias and prejudice that keeps them out of those particular situations. So now, with this being the first symposium for your father, will this be an annual event? I certainly hope so. And if not squarely as a symposium, that it will just be something else. But it is my plan, and I believe with the partnership with Ecumenical Theological Seminary, we will see something like this, hopefully henceforth. Whose brainchild was this? Well, it was a collective brainchild. Let's call it that. And that's wonderful too. I like the idea that first a purpose is determined, and then a group gets together to decide how do we let this manifest, and then bring people into it. And from what I can see, again with the conference schedule, it's well structured, and I think that the items of conversation are very topical as well, and it's certainly relevant in this particular climate that we're in with our current, let's say, Washington administration. We got another caller. Yes. And okay. Hello, caller. You're on the air. Would you share your name and how you're viewing us, please?
This is Sly Soul calling back. man-made poverty is violence that's violating many. How do we get the masses, or even some of these, I guess the churches, as many of them I feel are so bought off that they're not really educating, and it's hurting generations and generations and causing our youth to be in constant danger and causing a lot of self-hating and turning on each other. So how do we reach those that we can't depend on our bought and sold bought and bought that's not going to help us because they're helping more of the oppressor than the oppressed. So how can we, get this type of form to the masses that need to know the most? I'll hang up and listen.
Thank you so much for the question. And I look forward to both of your input on this question, but to stay in this lane that I'm in today, part of how we stay rooted to not only our reality but to our truth is to stay connected to kind of the legacy and of that we are coming from. And so in order for some of our leadership, particularly in the faith community, to really be able to, I think, effectively roll up their sleeves and do the work to make sure that our children are not in danger and that our families are not being harmed and that our community is not being broken and targeted by media and others, we have to remember from whence we came. And sometimes when we lose sight of our yesterdays, we think that things are all okay, that we don't have the hard work to do. And so the purpose of this symposium and events such as this is to how do we connect that legacy where it was a different time and a different experience and really begin to exude what that voice was, what that truth was, and help that inform our young preachers, pastors, theologians, community leaders to be rooted into the realities that exist for our community and to know that aligning ourselves with the oppressed is what Jesus did. And so how do we preach the power of Jesus and not do that work?
Well, one of the memories I have of the past is that the ministers lived among the people. And it appears that today, oftentimes, the ministers live out in a suburban area. But those members of the church that they preach to are they surround the church location in that community. So it seems that there are more ministers who are setting themselves apart from rather than living among. Even we read that Jesus lived among the people. Now, at the symposium that you're having this Saturday, the 19th, will the audience have opportunities to participate in the discussions after the presentations?
Yes, ma'am, and that's really where the rubber hits the road, because to be just talked to is not the call and response that exists within our community. It is going to be indeed a call and response engagement, by which I mean that there will be opportunities to listen and there will be opportunities to speak.
Okay, I think that when you have such a powerful group come together with the panel discussions and presentations, that it is important to hear from the participants and what they are experiencing, because it's those who are tuned in, and you, I'm sure, know that here in Detroit, there are 2 Detroits. And as a young lady who was just on the line says, downtown gets respected and the neighborhoods get neglected. And to talk about ways of addressing that, vitally important today.
Indeed. You made reference to the ministers, the pastors living in suburbia, and we are seeing more and more commuter members and pastors in our local churches. It reminds me of something my father would have said and did say in quoting a book, Once Upon a Time When We Were Colored. We had no choice but to live with each other, because segregation was pervasive in a way that did not even give us the opportunity to live where we chose to live, but where we had to live. And in that, we saw our ministers, our doctors, our lawyers, our teachers, our homemakers, those we lived amongst them, and so we were able to see who we could be. But,
and benefit
that's right.
from those images, those role models among us.
Yes, ma'am. Indeed.
Go ahead.
You know, I was just going to add quickly to what Sly Soul was saying, in that how do we engage more or less the grassroots? And one of the things I look at your father, Dr. Jeremiah Wright, and others, is that they were activist preachers as opposed to those who would just give you the sermon on Sunday. You go home maybe feeling a little lifted or something from that sermon, but they didn't engage in the entire political, social, economic realm in which all of us have to exist as well. And I think that's something that's truly lacking. So I would hope that the ministers, the attendees, because even the attendees, I think, as you say, there's call and response. I think even the ministers, pastors, et cetera, who will attend need to be able to listen to, let's say, members who have attended and want to broaden what the church does and make it more of a community type of environment and atmosphere, where they not only educate from scripture, but they also educate from political points of view, not picking one candidate or the other, but just educating us on certain things. We've had people as guests before in the past who would acknowledge certain things, but as we get down to the last minute and change, I want you to be able to share again all the details for the upcoming symposium.
Well, first, let me say thank you so much for this great privilege to be in your company this morning. The Frederick G. Sampson Symposium will be held at Ecumenical Theological Seminary at 2930 Woodward Avenue. That is in Detroit, this coming Saturday, which is May 19th. Registration will begin as early as 7 a.m. with the Dawn Seekers, and then the event begins at 8 a.m. and runs until 3 p.m.
There was a website or number for contact?
So you can go to the website, which is etsseminary.edu. That's etsseminary.edu, and register, or you can call 313-220-0447.
And repeat that again, slowly again. For us.
Certainly. Phone number 313-220-0447. Or you can go to the website, etsseminary.edu.
All right. Well, time goes fast when you're enjoying your company. And I want to say thank you to all of you for tuning in, and to say that it's not necessary for you to know everything. What is necessary is for you to know how to find what you need when you need it. We at Hood Research seek out as much information as we can to share with you, and invite you to share with us, particularly at the meetings that we have on the second Saturday of each month, 2 o'clock at the Davo Center. And that information helps us all to make better informed decisions.
Two things. One, I hope that many of you in the viewing and listening audience will be able to attend, because we all need to be enlightened and heightened. And the second thing I would say is, if you want to be nothing, do nothing. But the only problem with doing nothing is you never know when you're finished.
That's right. And also at the end, I want to say thank you for Rosa tuning in, and also Barbara for tuning in. And tune in again next week.
And now stay tuned for Get in the Know with
Marley B.